guys, so it's been a few days since I last updated you on Thursday. I'm actually sitting in my bedroom. It's a hot day, so I'm in the aircon. But I wanted to give you a update on my reading and then wrap up this, let's call it for a vlog. I don't know what to call these things. But yeah, so I've actually finished two books and started a third. So I did finish reading Diamonds and I think it was called Diamonds and Daggers. Yes, Diamonds and Daggers by Nancy Warren. It was book 11 in the Vampire Knitting Club series, and I have to tell you guys, I love, 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 love that series. It's one of my favorite cozy mystery series. Now, I can't remember if in my last update on Thursday if I had finished Diamonds and Daggers or if I had just started it. I don't remember, but I finished it. So I'll give you a quick recap of that. So basically, our main character, Lucy Swift, she runs a knitting shop called Cardinal Wolsey's in Oxford, and her grandmother, who owned the shop, died but is now a vampire. And she lives below Cardinal Wolsey's in the underground tunnels, and like they've converted it into a house down there for her and several other vampires. And they live underneath her store. And then one of the leaders of the vampire group, Rafe Crozier, he doesn't live there. He lives in a manor house, and he is like mega wealthy. He's like a billionaire or something like that. He basically is in love with Lucy, which is our main character. Now, in this particular book, Sylvia, one of the vampires that live down in the underground tunnels, used to be a silent film actress, and she gets, I guess, her lawyers get an email saying that they're going to be recreating the movie that she starred in, and obviously Sylvia is supposed to be dead. No one knows that she's a vampire. And so they believe, the people that contacted her lawyer believe they're just talking to her estate. So Sylvia kind of forces Lucy into pretending to be like a distant relative or whatever who inherited all of her belongings and her estate and everything like that. And one of the items that she supposedly inherited was this beautiful Cartier set. So it was a necklace, earrings, two bangles, and a ring. And the whole set is worth more than $10 million. Now, Lucy does not feel comfortable parading around in this Cartier set at some movie sort of gala, but Sylvia kind of forces her into it, right? Because Sylvia is kind of a little bit vain. She is actually like an older woman when she got turned into a vampire, so I don't know exactly how old she is because it's never really said, but she is older. And when Lucy attends this movie gala, she gets attacked and hit in the back of the head, and then all of the beautiful Cartier set is stolen. So that kind of happens. And then one of the accountants in the, like, that's dealing with movie production actually gets murdered. And so, sorry, I just thought I heard a noise. And there's so much like traffic. But yeah, so the accountant also gets murdered. So they're trying to solve the mystery of who attempted to kill Lucy and stole all the jewels, and also who murdered the accountant. In the process of like all of this, I loved the story. I loved it. It was so funny. Sylvia though is so pushy. She was so mad at Lucy to the point of where like Lucy had to stay away from her just in case Sylvia decided to, kill her because she's a vampire. Without realizing that this is kind of her fault because she was the one who forced this onto Lucy. Lucy had told her that she wasn't comfortable with wearing $10 million worth of jewelry that wasn't insured. And I don't know, I just really love what's the word I'm thinking of? Excuse me, I'm tired. The dynamic, the character dynamics and the relationships that all of the characters have with one another, because they're all so different. And I can't remember how many vampires there are, but there's quite a few of them that live in the underground tunnel, and they've all been turned into vampires at different times in history. Some more modern, some a lot older. Rafe, for instance, he is, I think, over 500 years old. Then there's another vampire that is, I would say, turned in maybe the 90s. So you can see different time frames. There's one called Silence Buggins who was turned into a vampire during the Victorian times, and she still is stuck in the Victorian times. She still dresses Victorian, that type of thing. And then there's Lucy's grandmother that was turned into a vampire only, I believe, 2 years prior. So you get these very different personalities from different times in history, and it really comes out in the way they deal with one another. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I have to say that if you're going to read this series, I highly, highly recommend the audiobooks on Scribd, because the narrator, and I'm sorry, I don't know who the narrator is, but the narrator just does an amazing job, and the voice is so perfect just for everything now. And the audiobook kind of brings, I guess, a little bit more to the story as opposed to if I had read it. So there's that one. And then I finished book 12, which is Herringbone and Hexes. That one is about Lucy, is because she obviously runs a knitting shop. One day she decides to knit this beautiful mat that has a herringbone stitch in it, and while she's doing that, her cousin comes in who works for her. And I did forget to say that Lucy and her cousin Violet and her grandmother, before she got turned into a vampire, were actually the witches. So Lucy was in the process of kind of picking out the yarns and everything she wanted to use to make this rug that she saw in a magazine in her store. And her cousin Violet comes in and tells her that she has a date off of Witch Date. So Witch Date is a dating website for witches on the darknet, whatever you want to call it. And so you start, that's kind of where you start off, and then she has this date, and then she decides that this guy is literally just obsessed with witches but isn't one himself, and she decides that it's not worth it. And then a day or two later, or the next day, I can't remember exactly, a goat skull turns up on the doorstep of Cardinal Wolsey's, which is the yarn store, and it turns out that it is a hex. And to begin with, they thought that Lucy had been hexed, but it was actually her cousin Violet. So in this process, they try and figure out who it is that has hexed her cousin, but they still weren't 100% certain it was for Violet. They thought maybe it was Lucy, except for Violet started to, she started to get really bad breath. Her teeth was falling out, her hair was falling out, she was getting these big blistery warts all over her face. She was kind of getting hunched over, and she was essentially dying. And then in that process, someone who Violet catered a dinner for the person who had attended the dinner, like comes into the store and decides I'm gonna start knitting. And then she befriends Lucy, and then they go have like a girls' night with her and then the other woman's best friend, and then the woman dies. And so they at first are trying to figure out, is this death connected to Violet's hex, or is it something completely different? Now, I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to give it away, but it wasn't what I thought it was to begin with. But then I figured out the connection pretty fast between Violet and the woman that died. Like, obviously you know the connection because they were at the same dinner party. Violet was a server, and the woman, I can't think of her name now, was a guest. So I figured that connection out, but I figured out like how like this woman's death connects to Violet, that type of thing. But the death is not in relation to Violet. That's all I'm going to say without giving it away. And then I was kind of stumped for a little bit, and then as I was reading it, I figured it out, and I was like, oh my god, it makes total sense, and I was right. But it was really, really good. I loved it. It was such a great book. I just like, there's not like, I don't want to, like, I don't know that I'm selling these books that well. There's not like a lot of detail that I can give you without giving away the story, because cozy mysteries are short. And they're cozy and sweet, and they're not too like detail orientated, but they're still amazing, and I loved it. And then Lucy, at the end of that book, Lucy and Rafe actually get engaged. I'm not giving anything away because they talk about this a lot throughout the whole series, and it's pretty obvious that's what's going to happen. They get engaged, so that kind of brings us into the 13th book and the last book in the series. Well, it's not the last book in the series, but it's the last book that has been published in the series. It was published last year sometime. So I'm hoping they'll bring out more because it's left me on an open cliffhanger. Not a cliffhanger as such, but just open. So the last book that I have started was Ribbing and Ruins. So in this book, we start off with Lucy planning her wedding to Rafe. Now, Lucy is a witch and a human. Rafe is a vampire who's over 500 years old. There's things that, you know, they've got to sort out. And essentially what happens is they decide to go visit this little sort of village, like marketplace, and they bump into a woman that they knew about but had never met, and she was a fellow witch, and they believe that this fellow witch was the one who created and sold the hex that was put on Lucy's cousin Violet. And while they were there, they realized that this woman does not look her age, because her grandmother was like, she's older than me, and her grandmother was 80 when she was turned into a vampire. But this woman only looks about 40. So clearly there's some kind of witchcraft going on. And it turns out that she has figured out the elixir of life, the youth potion, whatever you want to call it. And so Sylvia, the vampire, decides that that would be a really good gift for Lucy, because Lucy is a human and she will eventually die, and then Rafe will be all on his own again. So to try and help prolong Lucy's life without technically becoming a vampire, this could be the way to go. So Sylvia convinces the other witch to sell some of it to her for an extremely expensive price. And then when she gets it, it has been loaded with arsenic, which is so poisonous. And then it kind of goes from there. And then there is a murder that happens that is involved in this whole witch business. And that's kind of really all I've gotten up to. But most of the book is about planning Lucy's wedding and then trying to figure out this murder that's connected to this witch, basically. But yeah, that's as far as I've gotten up to, guys. I haven't finished the book yet, but even before I finish it, I know I'm already gonna love it. It's gonna be amazing. I highly, highly, highly recommend the Vampire Knitting Club series. It's like hands down one of my most favorite cozy mysteries. She does have another book series I'm going to check out. I can't remember what it's about though, but I love Nancy Warren's style of writing. Her cozy mysteries are amazing. So I'm going to check out this other series as well, and hopefully this year she will bring out more books in the Vampire Knitting series, because I need more. So yeah, so that's all, you guys. That's all my reading I've done, and I've listened to all of those on audiobook while I've been crocheting and knitting away. I really haven't done much else than that, but I've enjoyed it. It's been really great just doing that and just being relaxed and just letting my mind go and just creating and reading, and it's been great. So yeah, so anyway guys, that's everything. I really hope that you like this vlog, if you want to call it that. And I will see you guys later. Bye.